Sorry, as it is 6:30, we'll kick off, as we've got quite a lot on the agenda today. So just to start, during the meeting, all participants will be in control of their own microphone, and please ensure that when you aren't speaking, that you turn it off and there's no little red light. All reports published as part of the agenda will be considered as read by members of the panel. Published reports will therefore be summarised to allow us time to focus on questions. And please be aware that we are still in the pre-election period, and that I'll encourage everyone to stick to the topic at hand and try to avoid straying into any politics. And those are all my opening remarks. And first we'll go to the apologies for absence. I've had apologies from Simon Pearce and Councillor Sam Littlewood. And is there any more apologies received? Nope. Okay. On to urgent business. Yeah, we've had no urgent business brought forward, and I don't have any. And are there any declarations of interest from any of the members of the panel? Nothing? No? Excellent. And we'll go on to the minutes from the last meeting. So members are requested to confirm that the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of September 2024 are accurate record. Or an accurate record. Everyone happy to agree the minutes? Excellent. Oh, you weren't here, that's true. So thanks for those who were here. Yeah, have to agree. And I think we're ready to go on to our first item then, which is to receive a presentation from the Royal Greenwich Heritage Trust. So thank you so much for joining us. And so we'll just get your slides up, and then I'm happy for you to kick off. I know this item has been on the agenda for a while, so we really appreciate you taking the time to come and speak to us on a cold evening in almost December. So thank you for the time.
Okay, well, good evening. I'm Janet Denny, and I'm the CEO of the Royal Greenwich Heritage Trust, and with me today is my colleague Carolyn, who is the Head of Conservation and Estates, looking after the assets at the Trust. So I've been asked to present on three areas from the Scrutiny Committee: the objectives for the year ahead, the relocation and public access to the Borough Archive, and renovation and maintenance works at Charlton House. Can I move them on? Or? Okay, so just to kind of, for our people in the room to understand the Trust, we were an organisation, a small charity set up in 2014 to look after some heritage assets on behalf of the Royal Borough of Greenwich, and within our estate we have the following heritage buildings. So we have a Grade 1 listed Jacobean house, and it's very important to note that there's only 2% of the buildings that are listed as Grade 1, and they rank alongside Buckingham Palace. So it's a very important building that we look after. Within that, we have some gardens that have just been awarded a gold grade from some London judges. We look after the collection and the archive for the borough, some war memorials, the Tudor Barn in Eltham, and the assembly rooms in Charlton. So in terms of our objectives going forward, we need financial stability to raise money to look after these buildings that are very expensive because of the nature of them and their importance. So we need to protect and conserve the buildings and assets in our care, to be relevant community asset for the borough, to engage people in educational and fun events, and to allow increased access to the collection and archives. So in terms of financial stability, we need about £1 million to run the minimum of service at the Trust. We get approximately half of that money from a service level agreement with the council, and we self-generate the income funds for the rest of that. And this budget covers the staff, the running of the museum collection and the archive store at Anchorage Point, looks after utilities, insurance, etc., and the ongoing day-to-day running of the Trust. On an annual basis, we spend about £90,000 just on essential legal compliance for health and safety across the estate, and therefore you can see that any large conservation projects for this kind of selection of buildings, that's additional to that, and that's what we need to raise the money for and to ensure that we can preserve into the future. So the way we raise money and be financially stable is, one of them is tenants. So we have 3 tenants in our stable block, and interestingly the Charlton House was built as a place of education, and our tenants fit within the kind of serving the community and educational remit. So within the stables, we have the Greenwich Carers Unit, a music school, and a nursery. Within Charlton House, we have another school, and we have a speech and language therapist. At Tudor Barn, we have a commercial operator, and we have an education provider for young people with special needs that are in the assembly rooms Monday to Friday. So as well as generating income, we're obviously providing services for the local residents. Our aim is to achieve full market value for all of these and to be as sort of commercially astute as we can within the tenancies. We do a lot of venue hire, and this falls into many categories. We have weddings and parties. We have schools, proms, wakes, paranormal groups where people hunt for ghosts in our building. Of course, we have many. And a wide variety of meetings. We have the Multiple Sclerosis Society that meet and do yoga. We have some head teachers that meet for sort of team building and things. And people come to have meetings in our boardroom. Sometimes we get filming, and we have a cafe that runs in our Great Hall, the entrance area. What we've done in the last year is we have invested a little bit in the maintenance of our rooms to improve them so that we can improve the marketability of them so that they're attractive for hirers. Fundraising is going to play a big part going into the next year. We have always had funds over the last 10 years as we've been operating, and within the last year we've got a very successful partnership with the University of Greenwich, and they support our temporary exhibition programme, and we've been able to take that out and about to libraries throughout the borough as well as having it on site at Charlton House. We have had some community funding from the council that helped with our new heating system, and we've just successfully got some money that will develop us an inclusive theatre show for half term, and alongside that we're going to build a sensory room that we can hold into the future for when we have big events to support quiet breakout areas for people that need it. So ongoing, we need to look into more funds for the Grade 1 listed estate, and we need to recruit a fundraiser for this, and we already liaise a lot with Historic England and the National Heritage Lottery Fund, and we work with them to understand how their funding work and how we might access that. And this is really, once we've preserved the house, and that's the two threads of the trust, are to preserve the asset, but then to allow community engagement within it. So those are our two kind of dual purposes here. Our public programme is to ensure that people of the community of the borough can come to us for all sorts of reasons. So you'll see there we have outside events. Last year that was our Christmas light-up fairy. The lady there is our education officer. We run Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 services, all in costume for the 5 main periods that relate to the house and the national curriculum. These are primarily to cover costs and generate a small amount of income, but these are funded mainly from the income that we generate from elsewhere. So the second point is the relocation of and the public access to the borough archives. To give a bit of background as well, up until 2018, the Trust had a museum and archive centre in Woolwich, which is now the Woolwich Works area, where there was a reading room and we had full access to the archive Monday to Friday, and there were 5 full-time members of staff who could facilitate that. We then, with Woolwich Works opening, the archive and the museum collection was put into a storage unit at Anchorage Point. And so it was built as a storage unit. It's fully environmentally controlled, but there is no current reading room there, and we have 1 archivist now that works 2.5 days a week. It is important to note that it is a local government statutory requirement to keep and make available the records in their custody. So the situation now is that it's unlikely that we will return to Woolwich, and so following some conversations with various historical societies within the borough, we had a meeting with the leader last year and came up with an interim solution. So for 6 months we've been trialling this. The staff area at Anchorage Point was refit so that we can now have 6 researchers, and the staff are moved into a small side room. We can have 6 researchers for 4 consecutive days a month with the resources that we currently have. And we continue to respond to email inquiries. So we have a team of volunteers. When people write in with their archive inquiries, most of them can be handled by volunteers, and our archivist oversees that. And it's kind of really serious researchers that we facilitate on site 4 days a month. And that has been found to be very useful, and the users, it has been used. The 6 places have been picked up for the past 6 months, and we continue with that, and that's going very well. It's important to note, as I sort of mentioned earlier, that it was built as a storage facility, and this is an ongoing dialogue that we have with the council as to what the future of that might be. So we're looking ideally for somewhere where users can be safe and comfortable, and that it's completely accessible. In terms of renovation and maintenance works at Charlton House, it's probably worth starting off by saying that Charlton House has recently been put on the at-risk register by Historic England. So this is a list that's published annually, and it recognises really important buildings that Historic England are really keen to ensure are kind of looked after into the future. So it was one of 26 new additions that were put on in London this year, and it is a positive thing because it highlights the real significance of the Charlton House being Grade 1 listed, and there's not that many Jacobean important buildings in the country, and it allows increased access to funding. So this is something that we are working really closely with Historic England about, and we're talking to them about them. Just to mention that the reason we've put on the at-risk register is because of the roof. The roof leaks, and there is water ingress into the rooms, and that knocks on to our public engagement. And obviously they're very keen that the house just not remains standing, but remains useful to the community. So because of that, they are interested in working with us on some key works to, not all of the works to the roof, but some emergency works to it. So that will become clear in the next few months where we are with them. But in terms of capital works, obviously that's our reason for being. We look after the building. So in the last year, quite a lot has happened. We refurbished the lift in conjunction with the Royal Borough of Greenwich, which means that most of our important rooms are on the 2nd floor, so it's all fully accessible. We've got a new heating system replacing a very old one from the 1970s. So that's meant that this year is going to improve our costs and just make sure that the place is much more comfortable than it has been. We have already done some very, very emergency repairs to the north wing and the chimneys, and that has meant that there are no more leaks on the 2nd floor. So we're kind of working slowly with the roof to kind of get it to a really good state. We've carried out electrical works. We have replaced our water tanks. If you go past Charlton House, we've got lovely lights on the roof, and we've just restored some stonework at the front of the rear of the house that makes it safe, and also it's very nice and white and very attractive. So gradually we're glowing up Charlton House. In terms of maintenance works, this is a 10-year plan that works across the whole estate. It's worth going back to our walled gardens. They are maintained to an absolutely beautiful standard, and that's done mainly by volunteers, and we have a part-time gardener, and we did receive an award by the judges of Chelsea Flower Show at Gold Standard. So we really, as well as the practical nature of managing the house, we're also trying to improve the aesthetics of it and its desirability and attractiveness. So we look at the maintenance contracts. They're always tendered and renewed to get the best value for money. We have a tree management plan, and we have various ongoing compliance. I won't read that out, but you can see that we're continually looking at improving all aspects of the house and how it's run and managed and looked after. And in the next 3 years, we have some significant capital projects that are programmed in. So we need to repair our stable gable. Our Great Hall is the main entrance area where our cafe is. That needs improving. The Charlton Assembly Rooms in Charlton Village need some TLC. We're going to look at our grand staircase and the floors, lighting, CCTV, Wi-Fi upgrade with the number of tenants that we have and the expectations of the public. A Jacobean building isn't the easiest place to access that, but we're always trying to make things comfortable and relevant to the 21st century. We need to look at the Paladin Gate and the brickwork and the ceiling above the mezzanine in the old library. So these are things that we can plan within our existing budget. It's worth, I have finished there with the emergency roofs to the works to the roof are obviously significant amounts of money, and that is something we would need to find external funding for. And we are working, as I said, with some of the key funders. So that's the response. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that presentation, Janet. Really appreciate you taking the time to come in and present to us. And so I will open up to my council colleagues to start with. Do we have any questions from anyone? Yeah, Councillor Hannon.
Thank you for the presentation. It's really interesting to see what you've been doing, and you've clearly been very busy improving all the important buildings and work that you have in your portfolio. I wanted to just ask you some questions about the archive. I'm sure you're expecting this. There's been a lot of interest from residents about the future of the archive and making it more accessible. It's great that you've made the site
Sorry, Roshan.
work.
I've got no, they can't hear so much at the back. Do you mind talking
Sorry.
a little louder if you can? So make sure everyone can hear you.
And it's great to see that you've opened up the archives in a limited way to people that are interested. Is there a plan? Do you have any ideas of how you might be able to open it up wider? Is that something that's within your? Have you been considering that?
I think we're following this. It was a 6-month trial that we agreed with Anthony and the culture team, and there will be a report back. There is a meeting sort of talked about for the new year. I think within the sort of facilities that we currently have the position at Anchorage Point and a sort of part-time member of staff. I think without sort of consultation wider or external funding, there isn't something that we could immediately put into effect. It's something we're continually talking about because it's such an important part of what we do, and it is a statutory requirement. But I think for the sort of next few months, it's likely to continue as the 4 days a month access. But we are always talking, as I said, to the council about other opportunities.
I think my question was just about the broader vision and what your plan is for longer term options for the archive.
I think at this point, I'm not sort of in a position to say. I mean, I think, as I said, we're a small trust and we have all of the assets that I mentioned to you, and the priority, I think, for the immediate few months is the roof. We do have to provide an archive facility, and we've provided it within the means that we have, I suppose, until such point as those change or another option comes along, which we are always exploring. And we would look to, ideally, in a long-term vision, we would want somewhere central, somewhere that was completely accessible for wheelchair users, people on bus routes, accessible for everybody. That would be the ideal. So we're always talking about how we might get there, but I'm not in a position to give you a plan of what that might look like. But absolutely our vision would be somewhere central where everybody could access what they wanted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannon. Yeah, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for being late. Janet, for the uninitiated, can you go into more detail on why it's unlikely the Heritage Trust will return to Woolwich?
I suppose we're funded by the council and we manage the assets on behalf of the council. So the decision to move came from that. It's negotiations. We're always in talk about how best to put our collection out on display, and we are finding other ways of doing it. So we are working with libraries. We've got a display here in your town centre downstairs, town hall downstairs. So, sorry, I've lost track of the original question.
I think you've kind of alluded to that. This decision is the council's decision.
It's the council decision to return us back. And my understanding is that the situation in Woolwich has moved on. The buildings are sort of filled up with different options now. It's all part of Woolwich Works. That's its own thing. So I think now looking at the museum and the collection and the archive is now a sort of separate rather than being part of that original scenario as it was in 2018.
No, that's great. Thank you. And then just, you've obviously mentioned the issues with the roof, which are very pressing. You had your list of planned works. Obviously, if in a worst case scenario and external funding can't be achieved, is it possible for the trust to stop some of those works and divert funds there? Or would that in itself cause further issues with the at-risk status, do you believe?
What we've done, I've mentioned we did some emergency works this year. So on top of, we have a very long room on the top floor, and we use that for wedding ceremonies. And it was actually leaking inside. So we paid and did our own emergency works and made that a safe space now. So we would do that at that level. We could do those real emergency works. It would, of course, divert from other things. And some of the things that are on our planned work could be dangerous to the future, could be unstable, could fall, could cause injury. So that's why they're in our plan. But ideally, that's why I think we really need to focus on finding the funding, because if we did have to divert the money to the roof, then we would have to find another fund to get it somewhere else. So we are very mindful that that is where we are now, and that we need to look at all possible, explore all the possible options to us. So that's why it's a 3-year programme, so that the money is phased, and if we spend it, we can replace it in an ideal world.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. What consultation have you done with local groups about their needs to access the archive, and which specific groups have you consulted?
We have met with the Industrial History Society and I think it was just the Historical Society, and they were part of the meeting that we had with Anthony, but I know that they were in touch with wider groups and there was a petition, and so that petition was put forward as part of the conversation that we had with the leader about what steps should we take.
And how many researchers have visited?
How
many researchers have visited the reading room?
Well, we can have 6 at any one week. So sorry, we have that here. So we've got 34. So since January we've had 34 visitors and we've had 430 enquiries by email. And it's worth noting that the first, that's not a one-off inquiry. Once somebody's inquired, then there's a whole correspondence that the archivist has. So 430 individual people have asked, and they are fulfilled by the archivist with the volunteers, and then in person we've had 34.
And in the event of no external funding or a new home being found, have you considered other ways of making the archive more accessible, for example, setting up a virtual reading room or transferring items to Charlton House by appointment? Because I notice it's not, Anchorage Point's not accessible. You could have rotating temporary displays in libraries.
We do have temporary displays already. We have a room called The Study where we have we have an exhibition every year, and that's based around something relating to Greenwich. It's relevant to Greenwich, and we have had people who've booked and we've made appointments, and if they're very specific about what they want, then we do bring the stuff to Charlton House, and they can do that. So we tend to be flexible depending on what people's requirements are. Hasn't been such the case since we've opened the reading room. It seems to be that is fulfilling the need, because it is very specific ongoing researches, because people that used to use the reading room more frequently can now go to public libraries because you can access ancestry, when people want to do their family history. So lots of things people can now get on the internet or in the public libraries. So I think we are meeting the needs of the people who can't access those things and just really, really need the primary resources.
Councillor MacDonald?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. It was really helpful and informative. I wanted to ask a little bit about community access and meeting the needs of the community, and actually to some extent my questions might be better after we've heard from, I think, the people who are going to speak after you, but the sort of feedback and kind of vibes really that I get as a Charlton councillor and the experience I have is that the community are feeling that it's the house, I'm thinking about the house specifically here, has become less accessible, more expensive, and things like, I understand that it's on your presentation has been done, but like the lift being out of order for as long as it was, making so many of the rooms inaccessible, did lock people out who might have been using the spaces before. So really, I understand you might not have the numbers in front of you about how many kind of community groups and things are regularly using the spaces, but my question is that are you finding that that's reduced at all, or why do you think the community feel that you're adequately meeting the needs of in terms of access for community groups and people, and if so, why is that the feedback we're getting that it's not? Sorry, I know I sort of put a lot in there. Sorry.
So in terms of community access, well, we do have a number of community hirers that use the space. We have the Multiple Sclerosis Society that have yoga, as I said, on a Saturday morning, and we have a group of head teachers that come for support meetings, and we have some counsellors, not counsellors like you, sort of therapists that come and use the spaces. So we do have availability for hire. I think we've been tighter in some of our kind of usage, because we are very mindful now of the costs of everything, the costs of heating, the costs of staffing. So obviously, if people are coming at certain times, then they can have sort of better prices. And if we're already open, I think we're currently, coming out of COVID, it's been a couple of years now and things are definitely picking up. But I think initially there was a cutback from people that who wanted to hire, and therefore for those who did want to hire, if they wanted to open the house in the evening, it was very expensive for us to do. And then I don't know if you recall that heating costs for us went up 1,000% a couple of years ago, and we had to close the building from January to March because we just literally couldn't afford the bills, and that's why we now have the new heating. So we're trying to take steps to mitigate that. So we've now reduced the costs of that. So for a while, in the last few years, coming out of COVID, we had to really cut back on our costs, and that's why I put financial stability as our key point. We've now got to the point where we're at break even. We need to maintain that, and we need to go forward, but we absolutely wouldn't want that to be at the cost of the community. And I think alongside those hirers, we do have, as I said, our tenants that are providing excellent services. We do have the All Kids Can that meet in the assembly rooms. We have the Carers Association. We have free events. We have Bunnies in the Bed. We have the Teddy Bears Picnic. This week we've got ideally 20,000 members of the public coming through to see the lights that, working again with the council on that. So we are absolutely a community resource, and one of the objectives is to be relevant to the community, and we're finding our feet in the last year now that we're kind of stabilising, and it's all about how we can maximise that. Yes, we need to make money, but once we've made the money, and I think I made that clear, it is to feed back into our education programme, our outreach programme, access to the archive, and all the things that we're set up as a charity to do. But we're not able to do that without the financial stability because of the cost of maintaining a grade 1 listed building and the expertise that we need for every job that we have. We can't get a regular contractor. We have to have very expensive professionals all the time. So it is a balance, and we need to balance the buildings and the people and the money all the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I wouldn't want to at all appear to be kind of brushing over the financial issue, because it's very easy to kind of say, like, that's all very well, but that's not how it works, is it? It's clearly the most crucial issue, and nothing can happen if if there's no roof on the building. So I do understand. So as you're kind of saying you're getting back to a break-even point, and maybe what I was wondering really was, as the situation hopefully continues to improve, would there be any kind of, are you already doing, or would you consider doing any consultation with those groups that currently use the space regularly, and maybe groups that aren't using it as much as they were before, to see how, as you are able to kind of improve access, how it could be best?
Yeah, absolutely. We would look at consultation. We're entering a phase now. We've just recruited 6 new trustees, and we have a new chair. So it is a period of change, and we will be doing workshops on the future strategy, and of course we would do that with the community. There's no point making decisions of things that people don't want. So what are the expectations of Charlton House? What would people like to happen in their area? how best can we maximise all of the things that we have, the beautiful building, the collection, the archive, for the relevance of everybody. So that would be part of the next few months while we kind of head towards, you know, we want it to be relevant, we want it to be lively, we want it to be full of people and absolutely relevant to the community.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, Councillor Hannan.
Sorry to come back. I just want to pick up on something that you said where you, back on the archive, and you said that you felt that what you were doing was meeting the need. It's really rather a comment on this, and I think what I'm hearing from the residents is the importance of the archive, not just for researchers but to the public, and as an important heritage of Greenwich. And there's information in the archive that isn't found elsewhere and tells a real story about Greenwich, its identity, where we've come from as a borough. It holds really valuable information that would be useful to not just residents but to visitors and others to explain who we are in Greenwich. And so I think there is that heritage that's really important to display in all the ways that you've been talking about with Councillor Smith and how we can display it. So it was just really to recognise that aspect of the archive that we feel, or that I feel, is still really missing from what we're providing access to now.
Okay. No, I agree that we would obviously like to have a lot more on display, and I think I sort of touched with the study area, which is the only area that we have cases in Charlton House, and we've been working with different community groups over the past few years. It started during COVID when we had an online exhibition about what it's like to live in Greenwich and how we need to collect objects into the future, because COVID was such a historic time for us that in the future people will look back to it. And from that we have developed a physical display that happens every year in the study, and this year we worked with the North Asian South Asian community in Plumstead, and there was a lady that owned a sari shop there, and the display came from the community. In fact, do you want to talk about this? You're much more close to it.
I don't know. Yes, so this year we did do a South Asian exhibition exploring the South Asian community in Plumstead. Before that we did an Ottoman stone exhibition from the collection, and as Janet said, living in Greenwich. Is it not working? Is that not? Okay, sorry. And then we'll be installing an exhibition in Plumstead Library celebrating its 120th anniversary. So we have done over the last few years little exhibitions exploring different communities and their experiences of living in Greenwich, and we want to continue that. But as Janet said, we've only got a very small little 3 cases, and obviously displaying objects as well as archival. We need to make sure it's secure, environmental controls, and obviously we have to seek funding. We have been working again with the University of Greenwich to explore that. We've formed part of a Greenwich Heritage Network with other local groups such as Severn Droog, Old Royal Naval College, to explore different ways of showcasing our collection. We're also working with Art UK, which will allow us to put up some of our artworks online so people can access it that way. And we're looking at the London Screen Archives and how we can get video footage that we hold in our archives up onto the website. So it does allow more people to see it as well.
Right, thank you.
Right, thank you very much. And if that's all the questions, sorry, go on then, Sandra. You can have one more. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's a very quick one. I was just wondering if there are any goals or initiatives included in your 10-year plan. And I noticed that it says something on there about lightening. I don't think I think that's a typo. You mean like lightning, the weather?
Oh, lighting, I think I meant.
Yeah.
Oh, lightning protection, yeah.
Yeah, but I just wanted to know if there are any goals or initiatives included in the 10-year plan. It just seemed like a list of things. I just wondered if there was any actual initiative
goals
or
in the
goal.
10-year plan. I suppose, well, we want to mend the roof. There's a few, I think there's kind of a stage to go through. We've got the new trustees, we've got a new management team, and we're looking now at what is the strategy for 10 years, and that's what I was saying in the next few months that we'll be pulling together. So in a general sense, I've put the objectives of the trust at the beginning. So we do need to look after the assets, engage with the public, ensure we're financially stable. But in terms of the specifics of what how we do that and what we would do that, I think that will really come to light over this year. Once we've done the consultations, once we've gone through some strategy days that we've already got planned for February, then I'll be able to come back to you with that. But I mean, from what we know and from where we are, absolutely to preserve the roof of Charlton House, to engage more with the community, to make it a really vibrant place that people want to be part of.
Okay. I know we have had one request from a member of the public to speak. I just wanted to check, is there just one person? Does anyone else want to speak? Looks like mostly, yeah, just the one. Yeah, if you want, can we pass the microphone back? Is that all right? Or, yeah. If you want to sit there. Yeah. Can I just say, can you direct your question to us as the panel, because rather than the speakers? Because
yeah. Can you all hear me? Right, good. I'm Carol Kenner. I'm chair of the Charlton Society. So my statement is on behalf of the Charlton Society, and I apologise if I go across anything that's been said, but to be quite honest, it's almost impossible to hear what you're saying. So
I'll feed that back for future meetings and see if we can do something to improve the sound at the back.
Anyway, maybe me. So if you don't mind, I'll read my statement. Firstly, the Charlton Society is fully aware of the challenges that face the Trust in its responsibility for Charlton House and the Assembly Rooms, and recognise these constitute just part of their responsibility for the historical assets that's within their portfolio. However, we believe that the Charlton House and the Assembly Rooms are being viewed in isolation without the unique support of their location within the urban village of Charlton. We further believe by taking the village and house as a whole, it would provide a fuller plan for their future and present the conglomerate as a historical asset on par with the World Heritage Site of Greenwich. Charlton House sits within a village that boasts a number of historic England listed assets: St Luke's Church and nearby drinking fountain, the Bugle Hall, a pub, the Assembly Rooms, and in addition a set of almshouses, the White Swan, which is locally listed, and a row of shops on the south side of the village built at the instruction of the Marion Wilson family, all within a conservation area, but one that is sadly listed as at risk, as is Charlton House now. We also believe that by treating the house and the rooms in isolation, excluding the wider use of these assets to include community access and use, such as is provided by Shrewsbury House and Mycenae House, the actions of the Trust over the past few years have excluded the community and rendered Charlton House in particular almost empty. Having said that, we're very also aware of the coming Sparkles in the Park and Christmas programme, so we don't ignore you. It is the Royal Borough of Greenwich's policy to promote community cohesion and sense of pride and place in our localities. Charlton House has always been the heart of Charlton Village, but now local groups and people feel frozen out, ignored, and lacking in a valuable location to meet and activate the local house, its history and future. There's been no consultation with local groups and people, no understanding of the value people place on access to this incredible building. Some people have used the house for the past 70 years. It is part of their personal heritage as well as that of the borough. There has been little use of the asset of the community within which the house sits, nor the value of its support in maintaining the house and assembly rooms to present a programme of use that serves both the locality and the wider borough and visitors. For example, the assembly rooms were saved from demolition by SCARP, Save Charlton Assembly Rooms Project, a collection of local organisations, including the Church and Charlton Society, that undertook the raising of funds to repair the rooms, only handing it back in 1983 to the borough for safekeeping once main repairs were complete. Since then, SCARP has also raised funds to repair the roof when thieves stole the leading. The council's recent decision to sell off the car parks adjacent to the assembly rooms will only further limit the trust's ambitions to maintain Charlton House. The Charlton Society wished to give aid to the trust and expand the value of the whole, especially as the village was recorded even before the house was built in the Domesday Book. Cabas has maintained the Charlton House gardens, bringing them back to life to the extent they are now a major visitor attraction. We would urge both the council and the trust to undertake public consultation with a view to taking advantage of the wider assets of Charlton House, its village and its community to develop a lasting future for Charlton House. We wish to invite Janet and the Trust to present their thoughts to Charlton Society in the near future. And this evening we've discussed it. I believe I'm also asked to talk about the archives, as Mary Mills isn't here. Is that right?
Ah, okay. I wasn't aware of that. But if you don't mind being
very brief,
that would be great, because we've got to...
I'm sorry, this was said to me when I came into the meeting, so I'm not prepared. I'm part of the Greenwich Archives Users Forum, which Mary Mills heads up. It was promised when the archives were moved to Anchorage Point that we'd be relocated back to Woolwich by 2025. Our contention is that how can you have an arts complex without the history of a borough included within it? And there are varying opinions, particularly from the Woolwich and Antiquarian Society, about the safety of an archive that is close to the river, given that the apparent climate warming and effect upon tidal levels. Nevertheless, Anchorage and Hope Point is not accessible. I'm very able, luckily, but even for me, it's a hike to get there, and once you are there, it's very difficult to find. Now, it's been said to me that that's partly good thinking, because it means that together with it's unlikely to be burgled. I'm not sure that's if that isn't a spurious suggestion. But it is our history. It isn't the council's history, although that is part of it. It is our history, the people of Greenwich, and we believe that it should be fully accessible. And we also believe that one of the reasons that the borough didn't succeed in their application to be a cultural borough was that we can't get to our culture. I can't say more than that because I'm not prepared. But
That's okay. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak out. If you don't mind sitting back in the audience, that would be much appreciated. Thank you very much. I realise we don't have any kind of cabinet members, but I can see our council colleague is happy to come and speak in a capacity.
Where would you like me? Because I'm speaking with...
Yeah, just introduce yourself in the capacity that you're planning to speak.
I'm Councillor Jo Vandenbroek, and I'm here partly because, well, I'm fascinated by it. I'm councillor for Charlton, and I'm a trustee. I'm one of the council trustees on Royal Greenwich Heritage Trust. So I work closely with Janet on the, and I'd like to pay respect to the amount of work she's done in the last year and a half since she's been chief executive, because she's really moved things on. The house has opened up big time over the last year and a half. And there's just a couple of things that I'd quite like to speak to. Part of it is about the community and plans for that, and part of it is about the archive. I think I'll start with the archive, and I will admit that Mary Mills is one of my oldest friends. Yeah, don't worry, I've always heard a lot about it. Royal Greenwich Heritage Trust works in partnership with the council on the archive. And I think it's got to, as Janet's presentation made clear, the archive was very heavily funded and helped, by the council when it was in Woolwich. It closed very suddenly. Everything went into storage at Anchorage Point. The understanding at that point was that it would return to Woolwich. Exactly which building, I'm not very clear, but that was an understanding, and that understanding isn't there anymore. So what RGHT has been doing for the last few years is simply looking after the storage. And whatever happens, the archive, and that's on behalf of the council with very little funding. So I'd like to commend the work that's been done in opening it up. And all I can say is that there is a lot of ongoing consultation with the council at the moment. Nothing solid. It's very difficult. RGHT on its own can't make plans for the archive. That can only happen in consultation, in partnership with the council, for whom RGHT manages the archive. There are consultations going on. There is a lot of interest in the council about making it, doing all the things that my colleague was talking about, that we'd really love to open it up wider. At the moment, the amount of money simply doesn't allow that. It's a huge jump to go back to another building. We hope this will happen in the next few years, and we're working constructively with the council to try to make that so. We can't be any more specific than that. I very much, so that's the basics on the archive. About the community, we were talking about it only this afternoon, about how to ensure, I think when COVID happened and the whole place closed down, it was freezing, things, it was very touch and go, to be honest, financially, quite what was going to happen. And we're having we've got the new trustees, we're having a strategy day, as Janet said, coming up in the new year, where we were talking about let's see if I can remember, we were talking earlier about 4 steps, which is looking after the heritage, the building, which is gigantic, and that, the money for that comes from big charity funding to fix the roof, to do the big stuff. We can do the ongoing stuff with Royal Greenwich Heritage Trust funds as they are, but the really big stuff comes from lottery and other types of funding. But we need to look after the building. We need to do all the things that RGHT was set up to do, which is preserving the heritage, working education, preserving the archive, and we'll be working with the community. And we were talking about how bits of the building were empty at certain times and trying to bring people back in. And what can I say? All of the things I think that people have been concerned about, and I've really heard that concern, and I think we've been talking about it within the trust, are being looked at. And, those are part of the plans. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And I think a lot of the comments and questions were talked about earlier in the questioning. So I don't think we have anything else to ask unless you have any final comments you want to make.
There's one thing I want to say about excluding the community from Charlton House, and that Charlton House is free to enter. Anybody can enter during 9:30 till 3:30. They can go into any of the rooms. They can see the heritage for free. They can see the exhibition in the study. They can go to the beautiful rooms upstairs. They can go into the old library. And that's all free. And the grounds are free. And the walled gardens are free. So in terms of providing a lovely thing for the community to do, where they're open Monday to Saturday every week of the year, probably not Christmas, but it is a lovely free resource for anybody to come in and sit in and have a good look around.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Maybe we
you.
should do a trip as the panel. All right. Yeah, and thank you so much for your presentation. Yeah, we'll move on to the next item now, which is the pre-decision scrutiny of the anti-poverty strategy. And we are considering a report on the draft Greenwich support strategy for pre-decision scrutiny and to make recommendations to the Cabinet if we have any. And we've got, I think, Corinne joining us. Yes, and Damon? Or is it just Corinne today? And of course, we've got Councillor Smith. I think he's just popped out. Oh, okay. Hopefully she'll be back. Yeah, panel, what do you think?
What's the point in making that recommendation when it's already the policy?
Well, all right. I'll hold on for a start and just say you missed a bit at the beginning, but we are in pre-election period, so we can't be too political in this meeting today. But I think that what Councillor Vandenbroek and the speakers have said is that this is something they're working very closely with the council on already, and so we can just feed that in that we want them to continue that work and trying to look for a new space for the archives, which is something that I think the whole panel agrees we do want in the near future, as well as the group, clearly. So, yeah, we can put some words together and pass that along. All right, thank you. And do you want to kick off without Councillor Smith, or would you rather wait?
I think she was intending to give the opening.
The opening bit. Okay. Any other recommendations? Yes. Do you want to kick in? I don't want to hear your Jackie impression. I know. I should have looked down. There you go. So at the January panel, we've got nighttime economy, Woolwich Creative District, and the Cabinet member update. So with the new Cabinet member update for culture. Are there any other items that the committee want to consider putting forward? It's already quite a big agenda. One of the suggestions that we have had is potentially doing a tour of Woolwich Works before the meeting. If that would be something that the panel will be interested in, we can look at arranging something kind of beforehand if people can get to Woolwich a little early. Yeah, we'll explore the possibility and see if people can attend. And I can see Councillor Smith has arrived. So, yeah, sorry, Rachel.
Do you want comments on
well, we might as well do that item now. Yeah, if there's anything else you want to add to the.
I just want to say on the nighttime economy, can we provide more guidance on what we want to discuss, want them to look at within the report on that? But just to understand, so that they're talking about just Greenwich Town Centre, but are they going to look wider? within that. So there are other areas within Greenwich as well where we're trying to promote a nighttime economy. So it'd be good to have that kind of more specific, which areas they'll be looking at and what the report will cover exactly, which areas.
Yeah, we can circulate what we've already asked them to go into just after this meeting, because I think there's something we've already gone to them, and then anything you want to add, please do get back to us and we can ask them. Got a bit of time. Anything else on the final item? No? Okay, back on to item 6. I'll hand over to Councillor Smith.
Sorry, my timing wasn't brilliant. I realised how long I might have to sit here, so thought I needed to go. The first thing we've got is the anti-poverty strategy, which we are not calling the anti-poverty strategy. We're calling it Greenwich Supports. It's been a piece of work that's been in progress for goodness knows how long. I became cabinet member in May, and it was already well underway from Councillor Lolivar, who was my predecessor. There's an awful lot of work that's gone into it by both Corinne and Ling Jing and other officers, and corporately across the council. It's a piece of work that's involved officers from most other directorates where there is front-facing work done with residents. So I'm not going to take up your time describing what's in it because you should have been able to read it. Corinne and Ling Jin are here to answer questions, but it is a piece of work that we do want to get through and issued as soon as possible. So your questions, comments and views will be greatly appreciated.
Great, yeah, and that in mind, this is obviously a pre-decision scrutiny item, so any thoughts or recommendations that can feed in to this item before it goes to the Cabinet, please do put your ideas forward. Does anyone have anything to kick off, or I can? I will kick off then. So one of the things that I thought may be that I couldn't see much of in the paper was about access to legal services. And especially when you're looking at the prevention side of things, I think sometimes there can be incidences where people are in legal trouble. You know, their landlord is unfairly kicking them out and they can't, you know, they need to get a lawyer involved, but they're not able to because they don't have access to legal aid. And there obviously isn't much legal aid around, and that can lead people into poverty. So I wondered if there's more that we can do about working with law centres, to be able to provide residents kind of with that legal aid support, and how are you kind of planning to be working with them moving forward?
Yeah, so I think as a strategy, we are really looking for that to be a high-level overview of the direction that we're going in. I think what the strategy doesn't do, give a granular detail, it doesn't cover the granular detail of what we do already. And so what I'm really thinking about, the provision that we have in the borough, I think we are in a, compared to other boroughs, we are in a strong position in terms of the advice that we have compared to others. I think that doesn't mean to say that we have enough advice to meet the whole need. That's really difficult. But in the context of the in-house advice to the Welfare Rights Service, so you probably know that I represent that, but also in terms of what we fund and support our external partners to develop, so particularly through the Law Centre, Greenwich Housing Rights, the CAB, they're our core partners in terms of specialist legal advice. They're not the only ones in the borough, but they're probably the ones that come to mind. And in particular, a kind of a route that we're really proud of, or a project that we're really proud of, is the Advice Hubs, which was deliberately set up to increase the access to legal advice. And you're right, it's not just welfare rights advice, it's housing advice, it's debt advice, it's immigration advice, because it's so often when you're supporting a resident with their situation, it's not one issue, it's a range of issues. And so we've been running that project now. We're now in the 3rd year of funding that. That's currently funded really through the Household Support Fund, which really is viewed, the intention of that is to what that does, it increase the funding for the advice providers so they have more capacity to deliver that advice, and then making it accessible in community locations. So through the strategy, what we really recognise is the importance of access to legal advice and to ensure that advice that is accessible to residents. And through the development of the strategy and through our research, the importance of accessible, place-based support really came through our research, and the Advice Hubs is an example of provision where we feel we're able to demonstrate that. I would love to be able to try and argue, we're always looking at ways that we can stabilise the funding for the Advice Hubs and increase the funding for Advice Hubs and how we can build on that to improve the accessibility further. And part of the strategy, in addition to strengthening the provision that we've got, how we can build on that. And that's both the internal advice provision and the external advice provision. We know we can't deliver this on our own by the council. It has to be a whole borough approach. And we have a whole range of community organisations who are so strong in what they do. And I think we are just what we're wanting with this strategy is to build on that so that we have a vision altogether. And so we will take that forward so that we're all on the same page in supporting residents with the crisis that they're facing, but also how can we support residents, prevent them getting into a crisis situation and improve people's situations.
Excellent, thank you so much, Corinne. Yes, Councillor Smith.
I'm really proud of our advice hubs, and councillors are perfectly welcome to pop in and observe one if they let us know when we're going, that we can make staff aware. I was at Linden, I don't know, I lose track of time, 3 months ago-ish, something like that. Bumped into Councillor Thomas. It was an incredibly vibrant, busy time. It runs, see, I can remember this, Corinne. It runs from 10 to 12 on a Thursday morning. And I would imagine that they could have gone on for a few more hours. It was very busy. There were a lot of people attending. And there are a number of different things you can get advice from legal advice, from welfare rights advice to, benefit advice, all sorts of advice. There's probably 4 or 5 different people there sitting at desks waiting for people to come talk to them. So, if you do want to go and see one, just drop Corinne a line and she'll just tell you when and where your nearest one is. It's good to pop in and take a look.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you want Councillor Thomas, do you want to?
Thanks, Chair. And thank you for that, Jackie. I was just wondering if there is any mental health care available as well, because that is sometimes at the root of people who are facing homelessness, eviction, that kind of thing. I'm finding that a lot in my casework recently, that there is a mental health component to a lot of this. Thank you.
Yeah, so, I mean, it came through a lot through our research in terms of the complexity of people's situations. And you're right, the prevalence of mental health is very common when you're supporting someone with money situations and the housing situations, and it's very much a factor. In terms of the existing provision, a lot of the existing provision works very closely with Live Well. So through the Live Well that's delivered through Charlton Athletic Community Trust, that provides a whole range of support to support people with their mental health. And through that partnership work with Live Well, there is strong connections with Oxley's and with different parts of the council that works in a very strong multidisciplinary way so that we can support residents with complex situations. I don't want to portray that to be easy in a lot of situations, because it can take a lot of people to provide a lot of support and to work through and navigate the challenges of accessing the system and getting through to the right level of support. But in terms of, we're very much trying to advocate a kind of system in the borough which ensures that wherever we are combining that, I'll speak for example at the advice hubs in the welfare rights service, you might have a resident come forward with a might present a specific issue, and I suspect you might see this casework, they come forward with a specific issue, but as you start to get to know that resident and talk through their issue, you actually understand it's a range of interconnected issues that you find to solve their presenting issue that they're coming with. There's a whole range of other issues that you actually need to find that support to get with, and it can be a journey with the resident to understand what support they need and understand how you might be best to support that resident to get to that support, because one route or one approach is not going to be the same for everyone. I think we are, again, I'm going to refer to, I think as a borough we are in a more fortunate position than the boroughs in terms of the provision that we've got. And I think the provision that we have through Live Well really does help us provide that is a route that broadens the support we have for people with mental health. And I think that's a real asset that we have in the borough, and it's very much we're focused on how we can further weave that to work with a whole range of services, and we promote that as a route for residents, and to combine that support with the legal advice or other support, whether it's housing advice or employment support, to link that support together. I'd say I've worked quite closely with Live Well pre-pandemic, but very much in those pandemic years, and the power and the value that service has, and linking that with it's very well networked with a whole range of services in the borough. And I think I really can't speak highly enough for that as a service that we have and an asset that we have, and that really enables us to support residents is better than I think we might otherwise have been able to do. If you just provide the support just as that individual advice area, I think we're just more limited in that long-term support for residents. I think I've added that in a much more long-winded way.
Yeah, and then Jackie can come in after that.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, are the Advice Hub staff trained to signpost to Live Well? Because I have to admit, it's not an organisation that my residents will routinely mention to me that they're interacting with. So in terms of the holistic approach, I'm just wondering if the people at the Advice Hubs are,
yes,
definitely
yes.
referring people through. Thank
yes,
you.
We do undertake kind of quite frequent refresher sessions. So we know that Live Well are a very strong referrer into the Advice Hubs, and then they refer back, the organisations at the Advice Hubs refer back. And we are how we can further improve that co-location between those services. So I think, yes, it happens. And I think part of what we are conscious of doing is not presuming that everyone knows about all the services, so not just the services of the Advice Hubs, but all the organisations and community organisations in the borough. So I think and again, through the research and development of the anti-poverty strategy, a big part of that is how can we present the information to residents and services to understand what's on offer in the borough, so it's presented in an understandable way, and it's straightforward. It's what was really interesting throughout the research. I was expecting there to be more, we don't do this, or there's this gap in provision, or we don't do that. And I'd actually say there was hardly any of that through the research. It was just much more not understanding the full provision that we have in the borough. And I think that is something, I'm not going to say I want to say it's a quick win. I think I'm underplaying the work that's going to take to do. And I think Lindsay will follow on with, but I think that's kind of a key action that we want to take through the strategy, so that we can ensure that it's easier for residents to understand and services to understand what provision we've got in the borough.
I think Councillor Smith wanted to come in as well, but I'll let you.
Can I just go quickly? Then it was a very good question, Councillor Thomas, and I think it's like this strategy can't cover everything. It's trying to join up strategies with strategies. Public health and Live Well, whatever, do lots of stuff on mental health, as do Oxley's as well. I think if you look at page 64, this is, I think, what the strategy is about. So why do people fall into poverty? There is no easy answer to that. For some people, it may be a simple act of, becoming disabled, through an accident or losing a job or whatever. There can be a single thing that causes it. But mostly it's a whole multi-layered set of circumstances that cause people to fall into circumstances that they don't feel they can get out of. And what we're attempting to do is exactly what it says on page 64, is we don't want to wait till people are in the river drowning. We want to pull them out before they fall in. You know, and I think that's a really good analogy, not ours, Desmond Tutu's, but, you know, it's it is about joining. So, you know, what we want to come out of this is that if there's a worker sitting in an advice hub that gets somebody coming to them that's got a problem to do with housing or benefits or whatever, if they can pick up mental health issues and make sure that that person's getting the right support and referring them on. But equally the other way round, if someone's with a mental health worker, that they actually do the work to make sure that people are knowing where they can go to get their benefits sorted. And quite often what the welfare rights people, what the people in the advice hubs do is they'll pick up when they're doing a benefit check. They'll ask questions about health and they'll make sure that people claim the right things that they're supposed to do. So, you know, do they need a PIP assessment? Do they need extra support from Universal Credit? All of those things. You know, again, I would recommend that you go and see what goes on. But it is about joining up the, you know, we don't want any person that is suffering from a multi-layered set of circumstances in their life that make it difficult for them to function, to have to go through any door that's the wrong door. So if they go to mental health people, they'll signpost them to welfare rights as well, vice versa, and further down the line. You know, if anyone turns up at Citizens Advice Bureau, you know, they know where to refer. That's what we're trying to do, to join it all up and make it something that means that people work together better.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. It's kind of responding to Councillor's question as well as following on the river analogy. So from our research, there are 3 insights really came out from working with residents as well as staff. So a lot of residents told us for them to get meaningful support, they need to have a trust in the person who is supporting them. So that trust requires ongoing relationship. So it's very difficult to just trust anyone. You know, repeating your story multiple times sometimes can be traumatizing. So we know that's very important. And also trust is very important between staff members, particularly signposting, coordinating different support. So staff members and between services need to trust each other. So the second thing really came out is so complex. So we know from our figure, there are 85 million unclaimed benefits in Greenwich. And a lot of that unclaimed benefits was also, A, is people don't aware of that. B is they found it really difficult and complex to navigate the system. So I think as part of our proposal, we're really trying to, so if you look at the page 25, one of the priority is to coordinating early intervention between our support services within the borough as well as in the community so we can help people grow capabilities and also make it much simpler for people to navigate that so they don't need to fully understand the public services to use the service. I think another insights really came out is the people are really proud of themselves. They would like to starting from a strong foundation of themselves, you know, rather than going for help. And so what we recognize that is we need to go beyond presenting needs because sometimes people can come to us for housing or employment or mental health, but it's really important to go beyond that presenting needs, look at, okay, what is happening? And going back to the river analogy, how to be more preventative, be more curious. So that's why in the strategy, we really put forward a recommendation to really thinking about more prevention, more holistic support. Yeah, so that kind of principle and recommendation is throughout the whole strategy.
Thank you very much. I don't know how many questions we've got, but we might have to have slightly fewer answers, if that's okay. Otherwise, we might be here all night. But I'll head over to Councillor Hannon.
Thank you. I've spent a lot of my professional life thinking about poverty. I work in international development, and one of the things that I found helpful is to take a life cycle approach to poverty. So I don't know if you've considered this or you're looking at this, but it's the recognition that people fall in and out of poverty based on different circumstances happening around them. And I found that that can help understand the services that they need and that they need access to, for example, at different stages of their life, and then being able to provide that. So for example, if during reproductive years, families may need different kind of support because they've got a lot going out in terms of childcare costs, etc., and they're trying to work, might be different services that they need access to for the elderly, for example, and especially women that might be wealthy, that you might think is wealthy because they have housing, but then they're cash poor because they don't have a pension, because they've been through a divorce or whatever reason they have for that. So just my question is really whether you've looked at it through that lens and the life cycle approach, and whether what that would mean in terms of how we'd do things differently.
I have to say we have looked at a lot of life events-based analysis, but this is the first time I heard about that. We'll definitely look into that. Thank you.
I mean, just to say that it's something that we do in terms of when we're designing social protection programs. I do a lot of work in Africa and Asia, and when we look at social protection programs, which is basically the welfare state that we would say is here, we look at different stages of people's lives and what services they would need, and what kind of protection, social protection, they would need from that.
I think if I just said that, so I think we're probably not a million miles away from the approach you're suggesting, and considering like certain life events. So, example, when someone's having a child, or a relationship breaks down, or they lose the job, or lose their stable housing. So so we're very much considering those as the situations where someone's looking for help, and how can we ensure that all the relevant information is presented in a clear, accessible way to understand what help is available. So, but we'll absolutely take that away. Thank you.
I think the other thing also is about communication. So letting people, the way that we package it and the way that we talk about poverty, so that it's not a stigma for people, so that they recognize that everybody at some stage in their life will be poorer or richer. And it's not about saying you're poor, it's about the status that you're in at the moment, based on your life cycle, where you are in your life stage. And so it's changing the language, so it's not about poverty, it's about your stage of life and whether you're richer or poorer than you would be at a later stage, for example, or an earlier stage.
Thank you. So we can take that as a way, maybe as a reference.
Which is hence we look. How do you talk about poverty without saying the word poverty? It's like one of those Christmas quizzes, isn't it? But which is why we've called it Greenwich Support Strategy. Our response to poverty, because people might find it easier to relate to support rather than anti-poverty. Will they, won't they? We don't know, but we just kind of thought, we looked at what other authorities have called them, and the word with poverty was in there somewhere. So we put it in there somewhere, but we've not made it it's not just an anti-poverty strategy. It's about being supported at whatever time of your life you need it. But interesting comments, thank you.
And I will bring you in 2 seconds, but my question just sort of follows on from the stigma question, so I hope you don't mind. But I actually had a conversation with someone today who didn't go to an advice hub style thing because they were worried that their neighbours would see them. And I think that one of my questions was, how do we put in different ways for people to interact with the services so that can avoid that kind of worry about being seen to need help, and how can people be conscious of like the confidentiality, which I know that everybody in the council is very conscious of that anyway. But so that was sort of my follow-up question, if it's okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think stigma is a huge challenge, and very much considering that through the development of the strategy and the terminology and the kind of wording we use. And I think in terms of, it makes it, it's so important that we have a range of access routes to advice and support. So, for example, some residents only feel comfortable in attending in-person, face-to-face advice, whereas other people feel the reasons that you presented are absolutely fearful and don't want to do that. So it's really important that we have access through phone, online, in person, and that's not as easy to do that when we have like less resources to do that, but we have to fight to ensure that we maintain multiple levels of access so that it meets residents' needs, so that they are able to access the advice and support that they need. So I think that's our way to try and ensure that advice and support is available and accessible.
Great, thank you very much.
A moot point, very quickly. People can go to any hub. It doesn't have to be the one where they live. So, you know, if they want to go to one that's further away, because of that reason, we don't put a postcode on where anyone can go. Anyone can go to any hub.
That's really helpful.
Although we do try to keep it for Greenwich residents.
Okay, although it has to be Greenwich. Finally, over to you, Councillor
Thank
Davis.
you, Chair. This has been a really interesting discussion, and I think one of my questions and points follows on to what we've just been saying, and there's so many sort of charities and partners within the borough who I think complement and dovetail with what we're discussing so much. And how do you make sure that everyone's moving in the right direction, that there's not sort of duplication of processes and duplication of work? How can we feed that into this strategy? And I think that the strategy itself alludes to the fact that there's lots of strategies that sort of relate to this, but I think, you know, you could argue this strategy actually underpins all of those other strategies as the key objective and goal of those strategies. And so how can we use this strategy to make sure that maybe where some of those strategies aren't on track, or where we might need to sort of guide it back to the purpose, how can we use this strategy to make sure that happens?
Okay, good question. I mean, what was really interesting with the development of the strategy is just how much collaboration and commitment and across the council, I mean, and council, Jackie referred to, we did have all directorates referred to, and through development, you know, we've linked closely with the inclusive economy strategy, with housing, with, you know, and there's even like areas that cross over so closely that in some areas we've kind of, I'm thinking of in one of the proposals that we've put forward, it aligns exactly with the proposal in the Children and Young Persons Plan, and so that really gives us an opportunity to work closely, and it's not seen as, you know, a departmental strategy, it's seen as a whole borough strategy. And in addition to that, we've got strong collaboration across the council, but also through the development, we work very closely with a whole range of community organisations. And I think what we want with this is to keep building the momentum of that. It was also really positive, the amount of feedback that we had from the community organisations that were involved in the development and the feedback. So I think what we need, I think you're right in terms of that's part of the challenge is building and maintaining that momentum and commitment to it. And I think I see as the council, whilst we do provide services and provide some services, and I think the strategy kind of underpins the principles around that and how we want to shape and the provision around doing that. I think also part of our role is to support and enable the community organisations, and as part of that, to support and enable the organisations to underpin the same principles. So I think it's just as part of the council not doing it on its own, for us to not kind of, for us to not work in that way, and very much for us to be work in collaboration and supporting community organisations to work with us. And I think that's our role to navigate the best way to do that. It's kind of, and I think that's the thing we need to work to get that right, to work with our partners so that we're not, I don't want us to be that we're, I don't want us to take over us to do that really. I think so we need to find that right balance that we can work with our partners so that we are all working to the same objectives.
Okay, to your point, Councillor Cook, as well, there's probably some residents who would be more comfortable going to a partner than the council as well, and so I think that's really important too.
I actually had another question sort of following on from Councillor Davis' questions. And so I guess how much reliance will there be on some of these community organisations for this work? And if there is a lot of that reliance, how will the strategy kind of support, I guess, capacity building initiatives amongst those community groups to make sure they have all the resources that they need for the people that we're sending to them.
We have a big ambition. So in our priority 2.2, we really kind of set out what's kind of thinking big vision as well as starting small plans. So I think we really recognize growing community power is the vision here. So that's why this is part of the principle now. We really want to embed this principle as part of the council's response to poverty. To do that is really complex. There's a spider webs of connections, depends on what sort of response it is, depends on is it food or is it housing or is it skills or is it about women. There's a different intersectionality here. So in terms of starting small, we do wanted to start to first understanding borough-wide needs, because we know there are loads of borough-wide needs analysis and data dashboard going on, but it's really rarely, they're really joined up. So we really wanted to work on something that's like, it's a workable asset mapping. So then starting to understand where is the really strong existing relationship and partnership where we can rely on, and also potentially identify where is the gaps. You know, we have a good understanding of the needs, but I don't think we have a good understanding of the collective response. So then after that, I think we can work on some of the hyper-local response, because we can't tackle everything at the same time, but we kind of need to prioritize where do we go next. I think part of that will be involving community organization to see their energy as well. So I think we kind of need to go where the energy is as well.
Okay, I guess to follow up on that, because if we are kind of handing over some of the responsibilities to these charities and voluntary organisations, we want to make sure they have the capacity to be able to deliver on that.
Quickly, CAB, Greenwich Housing Rights, some of the legal advice on immigration, we don't ask them to come to the hubs for free, we fund them to do it. So, you know, we are building that capacity. I'm afraid the capacity for voluntary sector organisations is a little bit beyond our remit. It's in somebody else's portfolio. But, you know, obviously we are supporting them by, you know, when they're present at our advice hubs, we're funding those sessions. We're not asking people to do that extra.
Excellent, thank you very much. Any other questions? I've got one more. Which section? Yeah, so this one was a bit about, I mean, as councillors, we get a lot of correspondence and phone calls and emails from people that are in these situations that need our support. And on the odd occasion, I've had some feedback that some have felt judged or kind of looked down upon by some staff at the council, some frontline staff. And I don't say this in a judgmental way, because there are definitely, I have to answer the phone in the kind of to frontline services in my job as well, and I've many times kind of got frustrated. So I appreciate it happens. But I wonder how you might look to kind of address, I guess, compassion fatigue, which I think can be a really big issue in kind of people who do this work. But I think it's something that we should be aware of, and we should be putting steps in to sort of mitigate and training support and keeping people's morale high. So I guess a sort of wider question about training support, but particularly thinking about burnout and that kind of compassion fatigue area.
Yeah, I have a very good story to share, because we recently did a borough-wide, not like a council-wide frontline staff workshop. We have more than 40 staff members participating who are all working on the front line. We talked exactly that issue. You know, on a good day, you can support, but sometimes you also have a bad day. I think staff member really recommended having more reflective practice, both for themselves as an individual as well as a group, and that can really support them. We've also been talking about different types of training that's suitable. We know there are a lot of amazing trainings across the board. It's more about, again, curation, coordinating them to make them more available. We would really like to trying out some of the kind of in a smaller scale, coordinating the support together, and then offering staff member the environment to work in this way.
Yeah, and I think it resonates with me, because friends and colleagues that work in the charity sector and frontline services, it seems to be a conversation that we have all the time in our own lives, and I'm sure that many people at the council are in that similar situation. And I think the people that are doing that frontline work are the core part of this work. They're the ones that do it, and they need to feel supported and still have the energy to be able to give to all the support they need. So I'd quite like to see that could be quite, a focus of the strategy, if you have a look at how you can pull that out a bit more. And before we end, is there any other kind of recommendations? The only other thing was to maybe look into the life cycle approach that Councillor Hannan mentioned. But otherwise, I think we are happy to endorse and support the report, the strategy. So thank you so much. It's really clear how much work has gone into this and how you know it inside out. So yeah, thank you for all the work. All right, and then on to the next one, which I think might be you as well, Councillor Smith. Thank you so much, Corinne. And thank you, Lincoln. Right, next up we have employability for young people, and this is to note the Council's approach to supporting young people into education, work or training, with particular focus on apprenticeships and SMEs. And we're also noting a proposed post-16 skills strategy, which we can hope will maybe come for pre-decision scrutiny at some point, but you're giving us lots of heads up about it, I guess. So thank you, and we'll hand over to you again, Councillor Smith and Michelle. Okay, thank you. Excellent, thank you very much. Oh, and Fiona.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Let's put my glasses on. Okay, so I'm just going to do a brief introduction of the report. And firstly, just to say thank you for this opportunity. So I'm really pleased to be able to introduce the work the Council's been doing to support young people through our education, skills and training programmes. Young people are a priority for the council, and as a group, it's a common sort of cohort, if you like, across all of our programmes. And I think in terms of the work that we're doing in the report is evidence in terms of how we're supporting them to progress into employment, apprenticeships, training opportunities, etc. I think just to highlight some of the levers that obviously we're using as a council to take this work forward. And an example of that, we're not doing it obviously independent of our sort of anchor organisations in the borough. Our lead member chairs not only the Anchored in Greenwich Partnership, but she also chairs an external apprenticeship steering group with many of our anchor organisations sit on. An example of some of the work we're doing currently through that work is planning our Next Apprenticeship Summit, which will take place during National Apprenticeship Week in February. That's going to be a really sort of big programme of activity throughout that week, but on that day in particular. And I think in the report, there's some kind of highlights in terms of how successful that was last year. Another one I really wanted just to kind of touch on really briefly is Greenwich Access to Apprenticeship Fund. This is a council initiative set up really through our ability to transfer unspent apprenticeship levy. So that's gradually risen from 10% to 25%, and the current levels are 50% that can be transferred. And that came into place in April this year. And I think first to say the programme was set up in 2020 during the pandemic. So we appreciate, obviously it was a very difficult time for businesses, but also a lot of those apprentices were also being furloughed onto at the time. So, it was very challenging and quite a low start. But despite that, the programme has gone from strength to strength. Since the time of writing the report, we now have exceeded over $500,000. That has been transferred to local SMEs to create now 67 apprenticeship opportunities in the borough. So I think just to say that's money that would have been returned to central government if it expired, but we've been able to use that and utilise that to support local businesses. And so it's a good example, I think, as well as how we're working to make sure we effectively use the resources, financial resources of the council. And primarily with that work is through Greenwich Local Labour and Business. I think just to touch on, there has been some recent announcements, but I think people are aware that there's some reforms coming. A lot of those reforms also kind of focus on support for young people. So an example being, we can expect a youth guarantee to come forward for all 18 to 21-year-olds. Already what we've seen in that early information is that very much links to not only the Greenwich Local Labour and Business Service Club, but also our adult and community learning service. So it's about pulling funding, but there's also some additional investment going into that. we haven't got anyone from colleagues from HR, but obviously in terms of the corporate work the council's doing, they lead on that. Councillor Smith works very closely with the Cabinet lead for finance, resources and social value. And just in terms of the provision through adult and community learning, to note that it is a programme for 19 plus. So historically, the figures, if you like, for 19 and under don't exist. Having said that, the most recent figures is with probably 9% of our cohort are age sort of 19 to 24. That represents quite a significant, it doesn't sound like a big number, but that's 3 times the London average. And most of that work is because we work very closely with children's services colleagues. Lots of that work attributed to the work we do around corporate parenting. I chair a subgroup, education and employment subgroups. There's quite a lot in the report about that. I think there's one correction to note in 8.3. The table with a figure 278 is correct, but in 8.3 we mentioned a figure of 272, so apologies, that's a typo. I think just, you know, there's, as you say, you've asked for to find out a little bit more about, you know, the work that we're taking forward to develop a post-16 skills strategy. Obviously, that's a priority in our inclusive economy strategy. We've set that work out in section 9 of the report. I think a couple of things we just want to say, there's some work we're doing now that feeds into that, because we don't expect to sort of start that work I think until about sort of May 20 next year. But at the moment we're working to finalise our new skills framework and also our strategic plan that sits alongside that. That will be ready in the summer of next year. And then we'll be able to take forward the work around post-16 strategy. I think I'll end there, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Over, I guess, to the panel for questions. Yeah, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Michelle. That was great. And I'm going to make a political point, but not in a way that I think you would expect, Chair. We've previously had these discussions when I was councillor before, and we've always mentioned the apprenticeship levy, and I think how ineffective it is. Do you think now there is a new government, there is an opportunity to engage with them to try and get that reformed so that you haven't got these restrictions on how you can spend money and having to send back so much expired money? And is that something that the council is focusing on as a priority as part of this work?
Yeah, thank you. I think, yeah, already the government has signalled that we'll transition to a new growth and skills levy. I think that will bring more flexibility for certain. I think in addition to that, there'll be shorter courses. And there's also discussion about a foundational apprenticeship for young people. Again, so the focus will be on young people, which I think is encouraging. I think the apprenticeship reforms, as are, had the unintended consequence of, you know, disadvantaging, I think, young people, but at the same time, it's an all-age apprenticeship programme, so it's great for lifelong learning. So we'll hope it strikes the right balance.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, yeah, Councillor.
So I just wanted to ask about degree apprenticeships. I don't know if you've covered those else somewhere. I haven't seen them. Okay, and just your thoughts on those. I know that they're a really important way for some young people to do a degree when they would not normally have done them, but yet they're very, very competitive. I just wondered if there's a focus within this team on that and making them more accessible or opening them up, having more of them.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, I think we do touch on it briefly in the report, and it obviously is a good way for people to access higher education. And of course, yes, it goes. Apprenticeship levels go from level 2 right up to level 7, so that is, you know, equivalent to the master's degree level. I think, interestingly, in the conversations happening at the moment, there may be some reduction in sort of those degree level courses. So that's being muted, and I think, you know, that will be interesting to see how that plays out. But clearly, I think at the moment there'll be some sectors, particularly like health and social care sectors, where possibly, you know, we might still be able to see degree apprenticeship opportunities, but it is an area that's being looked at.
Yeah, Councillor Smith.
We've been looking, because we have skills shortage in the council, so, you know, planning officers are difficult to recruit, environmental health officers are difficult to recruit. Yeah, it's a bit off-piece. We wouldn't be looking particularly for young people and school leavers to do that, but we are trying to, with HR, create some adult routes into growing our own, if you like, rather than waiting for the market to do it, where we have to pay a premium. So we are doing that, but you know, I circulated a table because I get focused on things with my neurodivergence about there was a whole list published a few months ago of graduates and from certain disciplines and what they were earning, as opposed to people that had gone through an apprentice route and what they were earning. And I can't remember the detail of it, but it was quite telling, because there were some professions in which it was far more lucrative to have gone down the down the apprenticeship route than it was to do the degree route, but some were the opposite. So it's not easy to say it's better to do this, it's better to do that. I think, like most things, it's about having an individual assessment, but you know, the advantage of the apprenticeship is you don't get saddled with the student loan, which is not easy now with all the interest being added onto it, is it? So, you know, I can see why they would be attractive, and if the government want us to explore that more in the new strategy, then we're happy to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So actually, Councillor Davis was saying about the ineffectiveness of the apprenticeship levy, and I would agree, but actually that ineffectiveness has now seen innovation, in that there are now more degree apprenticeships and other professions like my own, librarianship. Traditionally, people would do a master's programme so you get that qualification, and that's actually now shifting to an apprenticeship, because again, instead of someone having to pay to do a master's degree, their employer is paying out of funds that they've already got stored in a pot that they have to pay into and they can't actually spend. So it's sort of interesting that it is actually beginning to have an effect. And I mean, actually, at another event when we had developers, there was an architecture apprentice who was there, and he was on sort of day release, so he went to university 1 day a week and worked there. So it might come with town planners, you never know. There are, yeah. So, but sorry, apart from that ramble, the question was, what are we doing to work with local universities like the University of Greenwich and Ravensbourne in terms of working on apprenticeships for local businesses?
Meeting that we chair, so there's about, how many were there? About 20 something, 25 different organisations. The University, Ravensbourne, they're all part of that. Michelle knows them off the top of her head, but they're all part of that thing that we do jointly together to plan how things are going to go.
So, yeah, the event coming up in the Woolwich Works during National Apprenticeship Week, all of those opportunities will be showcased.
We should try and get along if we can. Yeah, Councillor Davis?
Quite a lot of the points I was going to make have been covered by both Councillor Smiths. But I think the other point I was going to make is just, we've alluded to the fact that actually Jackie's made the point that apprenticeships can be a better route. How can we better signpost to kids in higher education or in sixth forms in Greenwich the difference of routes that they could take? And how can we, there's obviously been a lot of work with local universities, local colleges, to get them engaged, but how can we, broaden our horizons and get bigger businesses within the city engaged in Greenwich as well, and so that we can use their apprenticeship levies to fund courses here as well? What more do you think we can do there too?
Thank you. In terms of signposting young people to the option of apprenticeships, there has been a lot of work going on. also to address the stigma around apprenticeships versus university. But in the last year, certainly, and previously, there's been great strides in Greenwich in particular, where there's been enhanced careers advice in schools. So a recent report through Local London actually showed that 70% of schools in the borough have now achieved the benchmark 5, Gatsby benchmark, which is around the interaction with employers. So it's opening up these options for different routes to start your career. And what we did last year at the summit, we actually had a section for schools, and there were over 300 pupils that showed up to meet with employers, find out different apprenticeship standards that are available. So like Councillor Smith said, there are over 700, and more are being developed. So there's quite a lot of exposure around apprenticeships. It's a great way for people to work and learn at the same time, and it's really just showing that it's not less than going to university. And in some ways, the feedback from employers is that graduates who come into their workplace, they've got their qualification, but they're actually not able to work in a team. They don't have the right social skills. But an apprenticeship, you build skills kind of holistically, if you like. You get a well-rounded member of staff and someone that's familiar with the organization. So there's a big push around apprenticeships for us. We'll repeat the same thing in February next year when we do the summit. Again, a great focus on schools to do that. I also wanted to touch on degree apprenticeships. So it's come up a little bit more now because of the issues around the level 7s. But since COVID, we've been recruiting for degree apprenticeships. So with the Met Police, for example, we did a lot of virtual sessions and got quite a few people expressing an interest to take those on, and also working with our local employers to convert a regular job into an apprenticeship, which is actually not that difficult to do. Because one of the biggest challenges with the apprenticeship levy is actually the fact that it doesn't fund salaries. So it pays only the training and assessment element, and that's actually the biggest barrier, even for us here in the council. So where you have a vacancy and it's an admin post, for example, you would then turn that into a business admin apprenticeship, and it's exactly the same thing. So that's some of the work that we're doing to try and mitigate that issue around salaries for apprenticeships.
Great, thank you very much. And I just wanted to, that was one of my questions actually, it seems like the Apprenticeship Summit was a real success last time, so it's great to hear that you're going to be doing it again. The only questions I had is, will the strategy be looking at things like hybrid learning and modular training and learning to help kind of young people who maybe are still in school or college or even working balance sort of new training, new learning on top of their kind of other commitments, and provide any kind of older residents the opportunity to upskill?
Yeah, I mean, the strategy will be encompassing all of that. It's an ever-evolving landscape in the further education sector, so we would be foolish not to take advantage of that. And new technologies are coming out. It's a key part of the local skills improvement plan. There's a number of now hybrid hubs that have been built in every single borough. We have one ourselves that we've successfully secured funding for. So, yes, that will be taken into account. Yes, it's a short answer.
Excellent, great to hear. And the final one was when you kind of get further down the line with the strategy, it would be great to maybe have it back here for some pre-decision scrutiny, because I know we like doing that where we can. So that would be great if you can consider. And I don't think there are any other questions from the panel. No? Okay, well, thank you so much for waiting till the end and presenting to us. Really appreciate the time and you put into doing this. And we've already gone to the item 8, so that concludes the meeting for tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for all your insightful questions, and I'll see you next time.